Good day to all. So far, we have discussed foreign currency transactions, introduction, and sample common or usual foreign currency transactions, just like import and exports, then loans receivable and loans payable, which are actually denominated and expressed in foreign currencies. Now we are going to proceed for derivatives, which are very related to hedging of transactions, and the foreign currency forward contracts, which are also the usual examples under foreign currency transactions. So the transactions are now with derivative or derivatives, for example, the forward contract or contracts. All right, let's begin. So derivatives under our new standard IFRS 9, remember IAS or PAS 39 has been superseded already by IFRS 9 recognition and measurement of financial instruments. However, the definition is still the same, or the characteristics of derivatives. So they are financial contracts or other contract. Take note that financial contracts or instruments are actually having the rights or obligations to collect or pay contractual cash flows. So that is our characteristic or difference of financial instrument over, for example, the equity, let's say investments, which are somehow different with our financial contracts or instruments on the sense that derivatives or the financial contracts normally would have contractual cash flows as indicated in the contract, while the equity investments would depend upon the amount of the dividends to be received. Anyhow, so financial instruments or contracts could be assets or liabilities. Assets would have the contractual, or let's say the right or obligation to receive, because actually the equity investment is more on the right. So much will be discussed about that in IFRS 9. Then going back also, the financial instruments or contracts can be asset if we have the right to receive cash flows, and liabilities if we have the obligation to pay such cash flows. Anyhow, here are the three characteristics of the derivatives. So they follow actually their values and would change in response to changes in certain variables. These variables are called underlying variables. So in fact, we can have like the specified interest rate, the security price, the commodity price, the foreign exchange rate, index of prices or rates, a credit rating, or credit index, or other variables. So these are called the underlying variables. And then whatever the changes in the values of these, then the derivatives would also follow. Normally for this chapter, because this is accounting for foreign currency transactions, so we have to expect that the underlying variable is foreign exchange rate. Sometimes this can be like to the point we think of such as absurd. Like there was even a derivative wherein the index is on or with the changes of the weather. So whether that's going to be a sunny day or rainy day or whatever, if that is for tropical countries, but for the other countries having four seasons, so that's going to be also different. But can you just imagine like the weather as the variable, or the temperature that there would be, like there would be ranges of temperatures. Anyhow, that's the concept of a derivative. Hence the term derivative from the word derive. So it derives its value to a certain variable. Then it requires no initial net investment, or a little net investment that is smaller than would be required for other types of contracts. One example of that, for number one, I missed that a call option gives the holder a right to purchase a share for a fixed price increases in value when the price of that share increases. So that option gives a right but not an obligation to be able to acquire it at a fixed price, provided favorable on the parties. And then the call option normally is also going to have smaller amount than to purchase the share itself. So it gives a certain buyer the time to look into the market and check what favors him or her or it, if that is a business or company. Number three, it is settled at a future date. Of course, we are looking and we are thinking here about what's going to happen in the future, which is normally uncertain. And that's the reason that we are having variables and the derivatives. So derivatives, common examples, as I've said, would be forward contracts. We also have said futures contracts. So the difference between forward contract and futures contract is that forward contract is entered into by privately contracting parties. So for example, would be the business and the bank. So they are doing private contract. So we have to respect the privity of the contract such that, for example, if the buyer would be interested to buy goods from abroad and it needs US dollars, let's say the company from abroad is US or United States of America, and then that entity will have to negotiate with a bank for that purchase because normally the transaction is going to be bank to bank. So the bank would be selling certain currencies, US dollars for this example, to the buyer at selling spot rate. Remember, for the buyer, it would be the selling spot rates, while the seller, it would be the buying spot rates. Spot rates, by the way, are the market rates of shares, for example, or foreign currencies, meaning our underlying variables. The opposite of forward contracts are the futures contracts, wherein there would be active markets doing or entering into the transactions as well as our underlying variables. So I've said foreign exchange rates for the currencies. For sure, there would be active markets. In fact, it could also be like the commodity. So there are also states in United States of America wherein they sell their commodities at certain prices. Then swaps, if for example, in order for us to be protected to changes of values of the interest rates, then we enter into swap contracts so that whatever happens, the net amount would be the same. And options. Options would be giving us the right, but not the obligations to either buy or sell. We have to take note that derivatives are measured at fair values, and thus normally any changes of the derivative would be recognized in our profit or loss unless we have a separate rule for that. All right, so those are the four common types of derivatives that we will tackle in this particular course. Then for more discussions of derivatives, please consult or visit the book of Valix, Attorney Valix, because he has plenty of discussions, most especially with the swaps and then the other contracts used in commodities. Because actually in a foreign currency environment, so we are exposed to foreign currency exposures of the risks. So that's just one, because there are also interest rates exposures and commodity rates or prices exposures, which are also part of this particular broad course, but then that's going to be another item. So I would suggest you go to Balix. Anyhow, so this is the rule. Derivatives are measured at fair values. Then normally they are part of current assets because they are to be settled less than 1 year or within 1 year. But we will never know if there's like more than 1 year, so it could be non-current. All right. But if silent, again, current asset. Next, hedging. We just have to take note before we continue that hedging is not a requirement. So it's possible that entities would have derivatives, but these derivatives are not used in order to hedge a certain transaction. So hedging is a risk management technique that involves using one or more derivatives or other hedging instruments to offset changes in fair value or cash flows of hedged items. So it's possible that we enter into transaction, just like again the import of the goods from abroad. Remember, we're exposed to changes of the foreign currencies rates or exchange rates. So for us to be protected, we decide to hedge derivatives, for example, forward contracts, so that we will be able to minimize the risk, if not offset or perfectly offset the risks. So again, hedging is that technique, but it's not a requirement. So changes in fair value of the hedging instrument, which is the derivative, would offset the changes in fair value as well as the cash flows. By the way, very good. It's a good point of the hedged items. We have to take note that the hedged item is the transaction, while the hedging instrument is the derivative. So under, again, IFRS 9, there are two components of the hedging relationship, and they would offset or counter the impact or effects of each other. All right, so the hedge instrument could be any transaction, and we will know them one by one later on. It could be an exposed net asset or net liability, or simply asset and liability. It could be, for example, a commitment, a firm commitment, or it could be an anticipated or expected transaction, or it could also be a net investment in a foreign operation. And then this is discussed in the next chapter though for the hedging relationship. And then outside the hedging relationship, we have speculation. So in that case, that is undesignated hedge, so outside of the hedging relationship. But what is clear, guys, is that we can have a firm commitment or anticipated or an asset or liability without really the hedging relationship as we speak of. There are three, or these are the types or classifications of hedging relationships. And then we have basically two major types, the fair value hedge and the cash flow hedge. Fair value hedge is when the exposure is related to changes in the fair value or values of the assets and liabilities. And then the hedging instrument would counter the impact or changes of that. So for presentation purposes, if it is a fair value hedge, the changes on the hedging transaction or the hedged transaction or item, we call that the hedged item, would be reflected in profit or loss. So the foreign exchange gains and losses would be on P&L. On the other hand, for the hedging instrument or the derivative, it would also be part in the profit or loss as well. So it should be part there. Then letter B, cash flow hedge. The cash flow hedge is the hedge of the exposure to variability in cash flows. We're now talking here about cash flows. So for changes of the hedged item, they are actually not applicable. They are not recognized or NICed. I hope that is clear. So no recognition for changes of the values or fair values if ever cash flow hedge for the hedged item or the foreign currency transaction. But for the hedging instruments, they have to be reflected first for the current portion in the statement of changes in equity for the cumulative portion. And then for the current portion, that would be for the statement of comprehensive income in the OCI section. So again, I repeat, for the changes in the fair value of the hedging instruments or the derivative under cash flow hedge, I repeat, that would be for the current portion, it is the statement of comprehensive income in the OCI section just below the profit or loss or income statement section of the statement of comprehensive income, while for the cumulative, it would be on the statement of changes in equity under the other comprehensive income. So just so you know, other comprehensive income is also known as reserves in our old version of accounting standards. while the hedge of a net investment in foreign operation would be treated like cash flow hedges, but they will be tackled in translation of foreign entity statements. Because remember, we are now talking about a foreign operation or a business that is operated from abroad, and it is similar really for a concern or one item to be concerned about in translation of foreign entity statements. So I hope those things are clear now for the three types of hedging relationships. All right. What about for undesignated hedges, meaning they're not actually the hedges that we speak of, either fair value or cash flow hedge? Well, any changes in the foreign currency transaction should be reflected in profit or loss, as well as the hedging instrument or derivative, just like the fair value hedge. Again, letter C is next chapter. Hedge accounting is, of course, now the application of the accounting principles based on IFRS 9. And this is also not required, so this is to be done if ever we use hedging as our risk management technique. So there's an offsetting effect again of changes in hedged item as well as the hedging instrument. Banks, as an exception, are required to book the market-to-market valuation for securities at fair value through profit or loss on a daily basis. Well, because probably these are shares which are being traded actively. So we have to know the changes in the values at least daily. But for hedge accounting purposes, we're just limited like knowing it at transaction date, end of the reporting period, and settlement date. So go back to first part for you to be guided. And now to qualify for hedge accounting, the following conditions should be met. First is there is a formal designation and documentation of the hedging relationship, the risk management objective and strategy for undertaking the hedge. Hedge accounting is permitted only if there is proper documentation. This is very good. So it should be treated as a formal one, which is to be reduced in writing, and there is a contract. The second one is that for the hedge to be highly effective, it is able to offset changes in fair value or cash flows attributable to the hedged risk, but not necessarily like perfectly hedged or perfectly offsetted. It is like a certain portion. So by number two, allow me to mention that under IAS 39 before, which is superseded by IFRS 9, we have this particular rule. And because IFRS 9 did not like supersede that in writing, or specifically it's not applicable, so meaning to say it is an implied guideline. Well, that guideline is that for us to know that there is like effective or highly effective offsetting effect, then it should be that the percentage of the change in the fair value of the hedged item or the foreign currency transaction or any denominated transaction divided by the change in the fair value of the hedging instrument or derivative should be within the range of 80% to 125%, and the vice versa, or meaning the reciprocal of that particular fraction. So if the fraction prior is change in fair value of the hedged item over the change in fair value of the hedging instrument, so if we do the reversal or reciprocal of that, so we have the change in the hedging instrument or derivative as numerator and the change in the hedged item as the denominator, it should be within that range. So the range is 80% to 125%. So example, if let's say that the change in fair value of the hedged item is 100,000, let's say it's a loss, and then the change in the fair value of the hedged item is again 100,000 loss, but for the hedging instrument, it is 120,000 gain. So for the purposes of computing the respective range, it should be the absolute value or absolute values. We do not incorporate the concept of loss or gain. Otherwise, we would be like lowered to or lesser than 80% because of the negative. Remember, the lower bracket is 80%. So if we incorporate negative, really, we would not be getting even like the lowest positive possible amount, which is 1%. So that's a good thing about knowing that it should be the absolute values. And for the higher value, for sure, it's going to be infinity or it depends. So example, if that is like with the negative, so it's still it would be negative, meaning we would be like below the range, which is awkward to think about. So I repeat, it would be 80% to 125%, and you just have to get the fraction out of the two values or the changes, and then the reciprocal would be the other. So in that case, 100 over 120, if we are going to compute that, that is 83.33%, or let's have a rounded off percentage, so 83%. Right. Well, the higher one is 120 divided by 100. That's 120%. So the effectiveness range that we have, or the, let's just say, range specifically for the hedge relationship is 83% to 120%. Remember, what's our target? 80% to 125%. Question is, are we able to satisfy? Yes, because we are within the range. Our lower limit or our lower portion of the range is 83%. That's above 80%. And the upper range is 83% to 120%. So 120% is the upper, which is below 125%. So meaning we satisfied actually the range. So we can then say that such hedging relationship is highly effective or effective. So it actually satisfies condition number two. So just to explain number two, that took us quite a long time. Anyhow, so hopefully you have taken down of the important points of that. So to close it, how about another example? Let's say that the foreign currency transaction or the hedged item resulted to 200,000 gain. And then 300,000 loss for the hedging instrument or derivative. So if we divide that, if we compute, that is 200 divided by 300, that's 67%, and 300 divided by 200 is 150%. Question, did we satisfy the range? The answer is no. 67% is very low or lower compared than the 80%, even if we do not include the upper limit. Because for sure, if we did not satisfy one of the two limits, clearly overall, it would not be effective. So that's the guideline under the old standard, but still utilized in practice because it was not anyway mentioned specifically under IFRS 9. Then number three, the effectiveness, as what I've said a while ago, can be measured reliably. So on that percentage, number four, the hedge is assessed on an ongoing basis. So like for every end of the accounting period, especially for long term or even monthly, if we prepare monthly financial statements or quarterly, we assess its effectiveness. And for the cash flow hedges, so 1 to 4 would be for the fair value hedge, 1 to 5 for cash flow hedges. The hedged forecast transaction must be highly probable and must present an exposure to variations in cash flows that could ultimately affect profit or loss. So clearly, it's a matter of professional judgment now, and it's part of the contract that the variations are on the cash flows or exposures of risks will be on the cash flows. Question though, how do we know if it is a fair value hedge or cash flow hedge in school? Because in practice, it's part of the contract, or we can interpret it based on the wordings of the contract. For the school, it will be stated as fair value hedge or cash flow hedge. In the book of Alex, I've noticed that, and in the reviewers. However, for advanced accounting books, I noticed that it is not. So it's a matter of us knowing the wordings in the problem. So if there's a mention about the fair value as there is to be exposed or variability of cash flow, so that would be as fair value or cash flows respectively. All right, so that's one way of knowing the difference of the two or the classification of the hedge, because remember the computations would differ as to what particular type of contract or derivative that is. For foreign currency forward contract, then there are two types again of hedges, and we are exposed to the changes of the rates or exchange rates. So a foreign currency forward contract is an agreement to exchange currencies of different countries on a specified future date at the specified rate, which is the forward rate. So normally the transaction is entered now, but then the exchange of the currencies could happen at a specified future date at the specified rate. So if it is, for example, an asset or liability that is exposed, the goods are imported and exported now, but then the payment will be settled and the collection will be settled at a future date with a specified rate, whatever that is. Then if we want to know the fair value of the forward contract, then we are going to look into the current values also of the forward rates. So the forward rates, of course, could differ depending upon the transaction if that relates to a receivable or payable. If it is a receivable, again, we are going to look into the buying rates, but if payable, the selling rates. So remember, if we are the seller, we have receivables, and then if we have the receivables, so that relates to sales or revenue, so we look into the buying spot rates. Again, think of the opposites. While if we have the payables, that relates to purchases or imports, so we look on the selling spot rates. The reasons explained already in part 1. So in this case, the changes in the forward rate may be discounted to the present value, although it is not required, because if the derivatives will be settled in the short term, the changes in the rates in terms of present values, though, like the present value computation, will result to discount which are not significant. So that's why I've noticed also in problems that they will have to discount if ever that's going to be more than 1 year. So in accordance also with the discussions involving receivables, that they're to be discounted if more than 1 year. And then here are the classifications of fair value hedge and the cash flow hedge. For letter A, a foreign currency denominated asset or liability can also be a cash flow hedge. An unrecognized foreign currency firm commitment is a fair value hedge, but can also be a cash flow hedge, if you can notice here. So that's why if the problem is silent, like the words really of the problems cannot be enough for us to determine if that is a fair value hedge or cash flow hedge, these two will be treated as fair value hedge. So there must be a mention of all about cash flows for such to be classified as cash flow hedge. On another hand, a forecasted foreign currency transaction or anticipated or expected foreign currency transaction, so we expect something to happen on a future, in a future time, so that we will be entering into the purchase or sale transaction, then that is always a cash flow hedge. So I hope that is clear. Never a fair value hedge. So the two can be cash flow, but this one is always a cash flow hedge. All right, so to continue, we have a fair value hedge of an exposed net asset or net liability position. If we talk about net assets, so assets exceed liabilities. Net liability exceeds assets. And then we have to translate based on the current rate or the fair value or the spot rate on a certain date. Then the explanations here would really tell us that we enter into a forward contract because we want to minimize the impact of the risks through the usage of the hedging instrument or the derivative that is the forward contract. Then we can also say that the asset that is exposed or liability is completely hedged. If, for example, we deduct the or we get the net value of the foreign currency exchange gains and losses of both the hedged item, meaning the transaction, and the hedging instrument or the derivative, then the result is zero. So in that case, we can say it is perfectly or completely hedged. But that situation is not always the case, like seldom to happen, the more in real life. This could be like theoretical in nature. Anyhow, so this is an example of an exposed net liability. Net liability because this is an import transaction, or let's say, for example, purchase transaction. So that would result to a liability. And then because of that purchase, then Manila Corporation entered into a forward contract to buy 500,000 yen so that it can pay the liability. So from PNB in 60 days, that is the term, which is less than 1 year. And normally that's the reason that we do not discount. Also because there is no discount rate. So take note here that it is not discounted because although I've said a while ago that under our discussions for receivables, even from accounting 3 or intermediate accounting, if it's a short-term receivable, we do not discount. However, for derivatives, if there is like a discount rate, even if that's short-term, we are going to compute the respective present value. Anyhow, what is good is that should we compute the present value for short-term, that's just going to be PV of 1. But we have to be careful though, because if that is like monthly only, remember whatever is the discount rate, we divide that by 12, right? So do not forget, like I, periodic effective interest rate is I equals R over M. So if it is like 6%, and then that's like just for 1 month exposure, so 6% divided by 12. So hopefully you will not forget about that. Anyhow, for spot rate, well, you know these things, everyone. So how to record that at transaction date. So record the transaction because we assume here that the goods are delivered, we suppose. So December 1, billing date. So probably the goods are delivered. Then the transaction date. Afterwards, we have the balance sheet date or reporting date. And this is the settlement or payment date. You can notice that there is a dash or hyphen for FC. FC stands for foreign currency. So this is just like an annotation so that we can differentiate that this accounts payable is related to a foreign currency transaction, not just an ordinary transaction. Then relating to forward contract, so we have here the forward contract receivable, that is the foreign currency, while the forward contract payable is P. Now we might be asking as to the reason of this. Remember, we are exposed here. Our transaction is an import one in which we have a liability to pay. And this is expressed in foreign currencies. For us to be able to pay, we have to enter into a forward contract with PNB to buy the necessary 500,000 yen in zero point 0.5 forward rate. Okay, so do not forget that for the transaction, for a while, transaction, it's here the spot rates will be utilized. These spot rates will be the selling spot rates because this is an import transaction. What the forward rates will be used or utilized for the derivative. I think that's fair enough, but just to emphasize, then we are actually exposed with the changes of the respective rates for spot rates for the import transaction or the foreign currency transaction, and then you are exposed for the changes of the forward spot rates or simply the forward rates for the forward contract with respect to the receivable. So in other words, we will be paying fixed for the payable, but our receivables related to the forward contract will vary or change. So that's the good thing when we enter into a forward contract. because we are exposed to variabilities of our accounts payable, we want that our respective payable for the forward contract to our currencies would also be fixed. So that's the good thing here. And we think of the opposites again. Liability, foreign currency. So the variable here would be the receivable. And same is true if we think about sales. So for the sales, accounts receivable would be foreign currency, but the forward contract payable would be the foreign currency because we want our receivable to be fixed. We want us to be protected. So that's also for the sale. Anyhow, let's continue. So whatever are the rates here should be just copied. And then to compute the gain or loss, that's going to be simply the difference here of the rates. It's not clear, but this is like point, let's check 48. Yeah, 0.48 and 0.49. So 0.03 and 0.01, 0.01, and this is 0.02. So for spot rates, it's begin. Because the rates are increasing, that's why we have more accounts payable and we paid more here, right? So the rate is now at 0.49. This is discussed exhaustively in part 1. Whereas for the forward contract, here we can notice that this is fixed, the payable, but the foreign currency is changing depending on the value here. You can notice that this increased to 0.01 and we have a gain because the purpose again of the derivative is to offset the impact of the change in the transaction. So if this resulted to a loss, this is going to be gain. Although again, it's not going to be completely the case here, or just like the case here, wherein the impact would be offsetting or offsetting in a way or offsetting as a whole, like perfect one. Because we will realize here that it's just offsetted like a portion. This is like 15,000 and 5,000. And in fact, this can also be a loss given the case here. Like if this is 0.49, this would be a loss. Then I will also like to have, or I would grab this opportunity to give you a tip. Your direction for the spot rate determination of gains and losses would be the opposite of the forward rate. So if you can notice, if we deduct here, that's an increase and liability, so that's a loss. So meaning if this would increase here, that's going to be a gain. So you think of the opposite. So 5,000 and then here, 0.02, that decreased, right? So that's going to be a loss. And the receivable forward contract is 255,000. At the very end, we can notice that the settlement for the forward contract payable is fixed. So we are protected regardless of the changes of the values. Question though, how much really is the overall loss? So it's like 20,000 here. And this one, it's 5,000 plus 10,000. By the way, both are losses here, so that's why we added, but here it's opposite. So 5,000 gain and then 10,000 loss. So that is negative 5,000 loss. All right. So that's the impact of that. So what I've said, that is number 3 analysis, 25,000 overall loss. Anyhow, this is also equal to the net loss that was actually computed based on these two. So our respective transactions amount is 225,000 and then we have 250,000 here. So that is the forward rate and then the spot rate. So we have 25,000 net loss. So in that case, the company will lose 25,000 since it has contracted to pay 0.05 more than the spot rate at the time the contract was entered into. Very true. Because we committed to pay 250,000 here, right? That's 0.5 and this is 0.45. Anyhow, in the final analysis, we are protected because regardless of changes in values, still we just obtained overall loss at 25,000. All right. And then we may also analyze this. Are we overall, for example, perfectly hedged, or what was the relationship all about? Although we do this analysis normally at the end of the reporting period. So let's try this one, December 31, 2012. So use the absolute value, 15 divided by 5, that's 300%, that's the upper range. 5 divided by 15, that's 33%. So clearly we are beyond or outside the respective effectiveness range of 80% to 125%. Therefore, this is not a highly effective hedging relationship. All right, so that's why we have to reflect the changes in the profit or loss, both for the derivative, which is the hedging instrument, and the hedged item, which is the identifiable net asset or liability position here. The exposed net asset or net liability position is the hedged item or transaction. And so all changes will be reflected in profit or loss for fair value hedge as the hedging relationship. All right, so there's no much question about the classification. The determination of the effectiveness range is very important on the cash flow hedge because that would result to certain amounts to be reported to certain financial statements. So if this is like, for example, a cash flow hedge, if it is effective, at least, or highly effective, then the changes will have to be reflected to the OCI section for the current, in the statement of changes in equity for the cumulative. For the current, it would be for the profit or loss section in the statement of comprehensive income. All right. So I repeat, current again in the profit or loss section or income statement of the statement of comprehensive income. And for the cumulative, it will be in the OCI section of the statement of changes in equity. So that is if effective within the effectiveness range of 80% to 125%. But if above, or let's say that's beyond the range, so we have to reflect it to profit or loss. And I'm talking about the changes in the hedged or hedging instrument. All right. So the derivative, because the hedged item or the transaction or the foreign currency transaction for a cash flow hedge, changes in values would not be computed and reflected or recorded in the books of accounts. All right, what about an exposed net asset position? I repeat, instead of the receivable to be the foreign currency, it's the payable now that will be the foreign currency because we want the receivable, our receivables to be fixed because we want that our exposure to risks or changes of the receivables would be the same over time. Then what would be the result of hedging, or the results I've already mentioned a while ago. So it can be just partially hedged, or on certain very, very limited cases could be perfectly hedged. There's also a highlight here though that over the life of the contract, the initial difference between the spot and the forward rate is the cost of hedging the exchange risk, or when you say hedging, managing the exchange risk or minimizing the risk, which is sometimes called premium or discount. So normally there is a premium if ever the forward rate would be higher than the spot, and there is discount if the spot is lower than the forward, because we want that there is a premium, so the hedging is at a premium, we pay higher value for the forward rate. Okay, that's for the fair value hedge. Next, for, by the way, an exposed asset or liability. After that will be the fair value hedge of a foreign currency denominated commitment. So for this particular case, for a foreign currency denominated commitment, is somehow an extension of identifiable or exposed asset or liability position. It's because in a commitment, the transaction will happen on a future date. Unlike with the exposed asset or liability wherein the sale or purchase happened already. So that's why there is a transaction date, provided though that the goods are delivered, of course, and already received as well. Then for the commitment, it's just that we have four more dates now, or there are actually a total of 4 dates. Aside from the usual transaction, reporting date, and settlement date, we now have the so-called commitment date. So commitment date, then once the goods are, of course, purchased based on the commitment or sold based on the commitment, then we have the transaction date, we have the reporting date, and we have the settlement date. It's also possible that the commitment date or the, let's say, transaction date then will have like different dates as well as the balance sheet date or reporting date and the settlement date. So for sure, they are going to be on different dates. In terms of order, commitment date for sure is going to happen first. But the settlement date, of course, would be happen last. So that's given. I repeat, commitment is first out of the four, while the settlement date would be last. The question now is the order of our reporting date and the transaction date. So the transaction date could happen prior or after the balance sheet date. So example here could be this one, like for December 31, 2012, this is the reporting date. It's possible that the commitment date, which is October 1, the transaction date or the perfection of the contract date, some would call that, or the contract date could happen here in between or here. But I guess in this problem, it is assumed that the commitment date is March 31, 2013. All right, so March 31, 2013 is the commitment date that is already the committed one. So this is the committed commitment, as they say. So this is our transaction date. So we have the commitment date, the reporting date, and the transaction date. Settlement date may not be shown though. So it's possible it could be another date also, or it could be like this same transaction or same date. Anyhow, so that's just giving you a background or idea about what can happen here. So to summarize again, the transaction date could happen before or after the reporting date. The settlement date could be out of the picture. It can also happen after the transaction date, because how can you pay if no transaction has happened yet? I think that's actually like sensical. And then it's possible though that the settlement date is also the same as the transaction date. So meaning when the transaction happened, you paid it immediately, but that's seldom, very seldom. Here, we're just given the illustration in which the settlement date is not shown. It's just the commitment date, the reporting date or end of the reporting period, and the respective transaction date. So for this particular type of commitment, the analysis for determination of gains and losses would be based on the forward rate. So forward, forward both for the losses and gains in terms of the hedged item and the hedging instrument. So hedge item is actually here the commitment. This is the transaction, the identifiable firm commitment. And then this one is for the hedging instrument or the derivative. So the basis would be the forward rates first, but once the transaction has happened, so it will be the spot. But anyhow, you can notice that the spot rate and the forward rates are equal. But then just to emphasize, it is forward, spot. Spot when we have already the transaction date. All right, so that's why here, to illustrate, this is a commitment to purchase. So that's why the receivable is in foreign currency, but our payable is fixed in pesos because we want that to be fixed, our liability to pay. Then for the gain on firm commitment, the firm commitment for machinery, it's the opposite of what happened to the forward contract because the forward contract decreased, so there is a loss, but we gained for our commitment or the transaction. But for the March 31, so it decreased further. We can notice here that I will go to number 2 first. For the derivative, there is a loss because it decreased by 0.03 from 0.41, I repeat, to 0.38. So 0.03, that's actually 30,000. And then for our commitment, that's now going to be the spot rate basis of 0.38. For the forward contract, the basis would now be the forward rate. It's because, well, that's always a forward rate because forward contract will base on the forward rates. But for the commitment, the transaction, temporarily, that is based on the forward rate and would change to spot once we reach transaction date. So here, equal for the spot rate and forward rate. That's why we have 30,000 though. But for the gain on firm commitment, that's 0.41 minus 0.38. 0.38 is the spot. 0.41 was the forward. 30,000. So equal again. And our purchases is actually committed at 425,000, which is based here, the forward rate. Then firm commitment of machinery is the sum of the two firm commitment gains, 15 and 30,000, 45,000, and we pay at 0.38 rather 380,000. So 0.38 multiplied by 1 million yen. So 380,000. So that's how we got, that's 4. And for number 1, we can notice that we paid fixed 425,000. So those are the entries here. And these key observations have already been mentioned. Now, what about if we are talking about cash flow hedge of a foreign currency forecasted transaction? As said, we do not account for the changes in our hedged item or transaction, if that is a forecasted or expected or anticipated transaction. But for the hedging instrument or the derivative, we have to recognize the changes currently in OCI section of the Statement of Comprehensive Income, and for the cumulative or the accumulated values, such would be in the OCI section of the Statement of Changes in Equity, and of course that OCI section as a total will be shown in the Statement of Financial Position. Okay, so here is our illustration. Hopefully you can read the contents of this particular problem. Anyhow, we are also given the discount rate. This is like what is different here. In terms of computing gains and losses, it will be the same as the fair value hedge, just not computing though on the hedge item or transaction. So we have here for the different dates, and then this is a forecasted purchase. The purchase is to occur on September 1, so that is the last. Then forward contract is at 100,000 with 5.42 rate. So always forward rate for the forward contract and whatever derivative that is. Then this is fully effective because the critical terms of the hedging instrument match the terms of the hedge item. This is already given in the problem. All right, so let's compute for the difference though. We have here, if you can notice, remember 5.60, then 5.42, it grew. Remember, this is purchase, so when the derivative's value would increase, that would be a gain. Okay, so 18,000 gain. And then we computed the present value. If you can notice, guys, this is 6% divided by 12. I told you about R over M, the nominal rate over the number of periods on a certain year. So that's 12 months in a year. And this is the 0.990. And then this is n equals to, that's actually 1 plus the I to the power of -2 because this is present value. Why is it -2? Because we still have remaining 2 months. Remember, this is good for how many months? That is from June 1 to September 1. That's July. That's 1 month. But because this is June 1, so June 1 is also computed. Okay, so June, July, that's going to be 2. And then August, 3. So September is excluded because this is just the first day or date. So I repeat, June, July, August, that's 3 months. At the end of June, so that's -1 month. That's why we have remaining 2 months. And then at the end of July, remaining 1 month. And then at September 1, that's of course a 0. So no discounting. Anyhow, to discount, just again use the formula for PV of 1, 1 plus I to the power of -n, and we multiply to the values here. Because the rates are increasing, that's why we have gains. So present value here, no more present value. Okay, for change in present value, that's the differences here. So that's 29,850 minus this amount, here minus this amount. For the first ending, month ending, because it's 0 prior, so that's why it is equal to the change at present value for end of June 30. So the question though is, where do we present this? For the changes, that would be for current, it will be presented separately for a certain period now. So at the end of June, at the end of July, at the end of September, we will be seeing these values in the OCI section of Statement of Comprehensive Income. But for these values, the cumulative ones, 1, 2, 3, these 3 values, we can find them as accumulated ending balance of the changes of fair value of the cash flow hedges in terms of the variability of cash flow. So we can say, or we can just mention that these are the unrealized gains or unrealized cumulative gains for cash flow hedges or for derivatives designated as cash flow hedges. So a lot of ways of saying the terms though. But what is clear is that it is unrealized because the transaction did not happen just yet. All right, so let's check. I've mentioned them already. So this is a purchase, contract to purchase the foreign currencies. That's why the payable is the fixed one. We want it to be fixed, but the foreign currency will be what is moving. And then the credit OCI and realized gain would be current. So this will be reflected in the statement of comprehensive income OCI section. Then this is the settlement now. So the payable is closed at 542,000 fixed. Foreign currency is at 575,000 as well as the receivable. So the receivable now is closed. We received the foreign currency. This is normally part of the last entries in the prior problems. And cash is paid at 542,000. Then the remaining entries would be assumed that the purchase was made on September 1. So this is our entry, 100,000 times 5.75. This was the spot rate here because we entered already the transaction. So we use the spot rate. And then cash sales, so given, so this is the sale. And then cost of sales is the value of the inventory. There is now a movement of OCI at 33,000. This was the ending balance from the statement of changes in equity, the ending balance, accumulated value or cumulative value to realized gain, which will be part under the profit or loss or income statement section of Statement of Comprehensive Income. So this is an example of the so-called recycling of profit or loss items unrealized found on the statement of changes in equity in the OCI section or reserves. So this is allowed because this is actually stated in IAS 1 that this is one of those items that we will allow ourselves, or we are allowed to do the recycling. Another one is the foreign currency translation adjustment in the next chapter, in which once we sell a foreign operation, we are allowed to recycle any cumulative translation adjustment account found in the OCI section of Statement of Changes in Equity. And those are the only two items in the OCI section so far that recycling is allowed. Other things like the revaluation surplus for property, plant, and equipment under revaluation model, the changes in fair values, unrealized for the gains and losses of financial assets at fair value through OCI, not allowed. For the changes for the actuarial values for the post-employment benefits, not also allowed, among other changes in OCI. Then this is our analysis, of course. So without the forward contract, we can notice that our net income is at 383,000. But because of the forward contract, this improved to 416,000. So good thing, because there was an increase. Because sometimes, of course, there can be like little gain, but at least it's a gain. Or we can have little loss or minimized loss because of the impact of the derivative. So summary of hedging transaction. I've mentioned this already. I think I've mentioned that out of the three, only the forecasted transaction or anticipated or expected is always cash flow hedge, while the other two would be either or can be fair value or cash flow, but mostly fair values. All right. While speculation, on the other hand, if this is a fair value hedge, as mentioned, but can also be not a hedge, in this case, we just have to make use of the forward rates for the meantime. So just use the forward. And then once we enter into a transaction, we now use the spot. So that's why we use the forward here. That's no, that what is this? Or this could be December 1. It's not clear though. Or what is this? November 2. Okay, November 2. And then the rate is 0.440. So this is the forward rate. So we used it here. By December 31, it increased to 0.4450. This is a speculation to what? Purchase. So when the rates for forward rates would increase, there would be receivables, right? Or we want our payable to be fixed and the receivable to change. So that's why, again, I repeat, because this is a speculation to purchase, so we want our payable to be fixed and our receivable to vary because of that. So when the forward rates would increase, so there would be gains later on. So that's why from 0.4400 to 0.4450, there is 0.005 increase. So that's why we have the gain. And then by January 30, we used the spot rate because now we have been able to actually make the said purchase. Okay, so we have here the payment of the forward contract payable, and then this is now our receipt of the forward contract receivable, and we gained in the process. So to summarize though, just to end this one or the discussions, we can just recall that for the exposed asset or liability, it will just be the same as our discussions involving the import and export and the loans payable and the receivable. It's just that with the inclusion of the forward contract, so we are now going to use the forward contract and then rates, of course, for the forward contract, and then spot rates, of course, for the hedge item. But if we are having now the commitment, we are going to use the forward rates for the forward contracts or the hedging instrument or derivative, and then we are going to move to spot once we make the said commitment or transaction, which is also true for the speculation. It's possible though that for the speculation, we're not going to enter into the transaction, which is to purchase really the foreign currency, everything that is disadvantageous for us. But here, because we actually entered, so we received already. Again, if it is a purchase, we want to receive the forward contract proceeds. But for the speculation, we can also notice that there is no like a hedged item here that is clear, or a transaction, and that's why this is called an undesignated hedge. So that's the point, because there is no designated foreign currency transaction. It's just a matter of speculation on the currencies, and that's why we are exposed like one-way gain or loss that is already, or that is just on the forward contracts. All right. And then for the anticipated or expected or forecasted transaction, no changes will be reflected for the hedge item, only for the hedging instrument. Okay, so thank you very much for listening for part 2. It's quite long for accounting for foreign currency transactions, so stay tuned for the next discussions. I'll see you next time. Thank you and God bless.